Okay, hi, and welcome back to our little series about Venetian plaster tips and tricks. Today we're going to look into the waxing application. And in front of us here we have a nice polished classic. This is the smooth Grisello finish that we apply with the Venetian plaster. And if you notice, if we can get a tighter shot on this, maybe you can see you have a decent amount of high and low color to your finish. Now this is a natural occurrence, and this is going to happen to you especially if you're working with dark colors. The reason is because the areas that have received the least amount of compression, and you can see them here, some of these lower areas, those are the areas that are going to polish up the least. And the fact that they polish up the least also creates a lighter variation of that same color. This is a single color that was applied, using our traditional Venetian plaster polishing, compressing. And so this is a signature look, that kind of high-low contrast of color. However, especially when you get into the darker colors, it can become somewhat problematic. So I'm going to show you a little trick. One of the things you have to be a little bit careful with when you use this wax is it can tend to have just a little bit of a whitening effect, just because there's, especially when you're working with dark colors, there can be what they call ghosting. You can get just a little whitening. So it's never a bad idea, especially when you're working with dark colors, to just put a tiny bit of pigment into your material. That will counteract that ghosting when you have a little bit of pigment in your wax. But we're going to take just a little bit of the same pigment that was used to actually tint the plaster finish that we did, and we're going to just add that to our wax. And if you notice, I'm being very conservative, because while this is a great solution to helping some of those lighter areas go consistent, if you over tint it, it can flip-flop in the other direction, and your lightest areas, because your lightest areas are a little less porous, they're going to absorb a little more of the wax, and so they're also, when you tint it, they're going to absorb a little more of the color. So just be very careful. I probably put, I just have a couple ounces in here, but I just put, as you notice, a couple of drops in here. So, and always test a little area first before you go and ruin your entire wall, right? Okay, so back to our little sample board here of our classic, Marmarino classic Venetian plaster application. Again, let's look at the light to dark inconsistencies and just see the overall pattern. And I would classify this as a good but not a flawless application. And I think this is, until you get really good, this is probably the type of application you'll end up doing. So again, we're going to just try to work on fixing, balancing some of that light to dark toning. And again, I'll remind you that these areas that are lighter are generally going to be a little more absorbent. So we're going to take advantage of that absorbency. Now, I'll take a little tape right here so we can have a little before and after glimpse of the effect of this pigmented wax on our finish. So here's our pigmented beeswax, and we're just going to go ahead and apply. Oops. So that wax will just be applied over the whole surface. Okay, so we're just wiping off the excess here, and our next shot will be in a few minutes, 5-10 minutes after this dries out. Okay, that was about 10 minutes, and the board is completely dry now. And the final step would actually be just a little more of a vigorous polish, just kind of like you're polishing your car. And if you can see, I have a really nice high sheen on there. Now, what you'll see, you still see some contrast. You still see that, traditional Venetian plaster high-low color change. But if we come back to that initial area of the board, you might want to get a real tight shot on that. But you can see that there was quite a bit more light to dark contrast from our original finish before we tinted our wax to our final finish. And we probably could have pushed that color, bumped that color up even a little bit more to pigment these lighter areas just a little bit darker, but I'm pretty satisfied with that. And that's cut our contrast, I would say, if I just had to guesstimate, about 50% at least. And that's a really helpful trick that you can have in your arsenal for solving some of these color separation issues that you may face when you're doing a big polished plaster finish.